Raquel. I just want to start by asking Heather how you have found the time. I mean, this sounds like a quip, but how you found the time to write 200 novels and novellas with 5 children at home. I mean, seriously.
I know. I love it that the only reaction I got was 5 children. So thank you all. Thank you. No, the kids are great. The kids to me are the reason that I have a career, because I was doing dinner theater and a lot of commercials in the state of Florida, and I still love it, and that's why we have the slush pile players and why we do theater. And I love the way we do theater now, because I write the scripts, and naturally I write a role for me, and I can't be turned down. It's my show. So, but the kids, the reason that I wound up staying home is because I seriously couldn't afford to keep going to auditions. And then one of the last things I had gotten when I was still like working at it actively was a commercial for something called a trim twist. And the trim twist is a thing with which you lose weight. You stand on it, it's a little box, and you twist. And I saw something similar to it coming back out. Well, I was hired for this commercial, and it was actually fun. It was great, and I was paid. The whole thing was trim twist. Everybody's doing it. So they had me, they had a military man, they had a number of different type people, and they had my dog. And the dog got a bigger paycheck than I did. So that's, by the 3rd child, I really couldn't afford it. I couldn't keep going to auditions. We're a right-to-work state, Florida, so even when you get something, you can't guarantee you're going to make anything on it. And we were desperately hoping that I could write and could get published, since I couldn't afford to go to work, which in fact, when Derek was in 2nd grade, his teacher asked him what his mother did for a living, and he told her that I typed at home because apparently no one would give me a job.
Well, good, but I know so many people who really talk about loving writing and they want to write, and they say they have trouble finding the time. That's why I really asked about the kids, because you have how some people say, well, how would I ever get like a day or a week or a weekend or a year to write a book? But when you've got
but you never,
family,
but you know that. You
yes.
kidding? Because I couldn't help this when we were talking about practicing law. Now I'm in awe of somebody who actually made it through law school, which is, I mean, not taking anything away. I had a phenomenal college education. I was very lucky. But I don't think I would have made it through law school.
I almost didn't.
That's so hard. But I always love the fact that you're practicing law, and I'm just trying to say, what, you couldn't get it right?
Yeah, I know. I'll keep doing it until I figure it out. Yeah.
There you go. There you go. So, but you got 3 kids and a law career.
Yeah, it's. I tell friends, anybody who says, "How do you find the time to write?" You have to. It's a decision. Like none of us have a lot of time. But number one, to start with, if you want to write a book, if you said, I don't have time to sit down and write a novel. If you wrote a page a day,
365 days.
365 days, you'd have a book.
Yeah,
at least a terrible first draft of a book, but you would have a book in a year. So that's the way you got to start to think of it. Sometimes you've got to say, okay, instead of binge watching Dexter tonight.
Okay, wait a minute. No,
I'm sorry, not Dexter. Instead of binge watching House of Cards tonight, I'm going to find.
No, but I don't you think it's really a matter of want and a matter of discipline, because I think the thing is, it doesn't. Maybe you can have, maybe you're really lucky and you have a lot of time. Maybe you're not, and you are working a full-time job and you do have children. There's still going to be an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours during that week sometimes. And say you had the hour every day, well, then you could work on doing that page a day. Say you were going to get 2 or 3 hours somewhere on your own during the week. Then you have to try to do your 7 pages in that time. But I mean, even if you just think about it, how in a year that would add up, it's remarkable. The only thing you have to do is be dedicated, and if it is 1 hour, always commit to that 1 hour, and that will get it done.
That's true. I'm remembering now. You said you were joking about my kids. I was the mom in the parking lot with a notebook. I mean, everybody else was standing outside, plotting their PTA coup or whatever it was that they were.
And they're all sitting there thinking, that lawyer, look at her, she's so antisocial.
Yes, exactly. But it was actually, it was when a kid started taking the school bus that I knew exactly what time they got on it. And I knew exactly what time they got off of it, and I knew that those were the hours, if I was going to ever find the time to do it, that I had to start doing it. But like you said, it's a matter of passion. I had always wanted to write a book, and when I finally found myself running out of excuses not to do it, I thought, I've got the time. The kids
Yeah.
are all, they
And
are
now's
on
the
that
time to
school
do it.
bus, then if I don't do it now, if I don't, it's time to put up or shut up. And so I sat down and wrote my first very terrible novel.
I think mine have also been tremendously instrumental because the many different things they've done in their lives have had a lot to do with what I have written and what I've done. One was an Arthur Murray dance instructor, and so one of mine is Dead on the Dance Floor. Everybody in his studio knew who I should kill. Some of them even knew how. And we had a lot of fun. I think there's a video still up of that, because they had gotten into video promotions. What are they? Book trailers. And so we were able to do a book trailer for that book at the dance studio. And I got to be my own dying diva. It was a great deal of fun. But throughout, another one of that same child's best friends is a United States Marshal, and he made arrangements to take me through the United States Marshal's office in Key West, Florida, where he was one of 2 marshals assigned. So we really got to see it. But he was so interesting because he could tell me, yeah, there's only 2 of us. So when we need help, we do call the Coast Guard, we do call the local police, we do the things that they bring in. And then he later brought me into the one in Miami, which is quite different than what's going on in Key West. But I think they've just given me tremendous stuff. And they've also given me, I think, one of my funniest moments ever, which was I had written a historical series called One More Blue, One More Gray, and One Road West. And a lot of the reason I had done that is my husband is Italian, and when they moved into the United States, his entire family moved into Massachusetts. Because his dad was one of 11 and his mother's one of 6, he has about 200 cousins living in Massachusetts. So every year we would go up and down the East Coast from Florida up to Massachusetts and back down to visit family. We had a home up there for a while. But the thing to do when you have 5 children and you are just beginning a writing career is to find the cheapest things possible. Cheapest things possible are museums, churches, and battle reenactments. So we had been to almost every battle reenactment in the South. Wound up sleeping in the car in Gettysburg because we didn't realize that you wouldn't be able to get a hotel room for like hundreds of miles during the reenactment there. But one of the kids came running out to me when we were in Gettysburg, and they were like really excited and told me that the books were in the Abe Lincoln Museum. I was incredibly excited, like I couldn't believe they were actually carrying me in the Abe Lincoln Museum. And I went running in and I picked up the book and it's like, oh my God, it is my book. And the sales lady walked up to me and she said, may I help you? And I looked at her and I said, this is my book. And she looked at me and said, oh honey, no it's not. You have not paid me for it yet. So the kids provide so much, don't you think?
Absolutely, yeah. As far as, it helps when you write. We write suspense, but you still have to be able to write about people of all ages.
Exactly, yeah.
And it helps. I've noticed going back, looking through my books, the earlier books tend to have kids who are much younger.
Yeah, and then they've been getting older.
Now they've been getting older in the later books.
I think you and I have done one of the same things, though. I can't kill a child. Have you killed a child?
No.
You killed a child. I didn't think you had, because I know
did
most
kill a
of them,
dog once, and I still get hate mail about it. So if any of you want to, yes, I know. I'm sorry. Don't ever kill a dog.
You never saw that Robert De Niro movie that tells you don't kill the book. I think it's called
No.
Wag the Dog or something. He's a huge Hollywood producer, but his director sneaks something in on him and kills the dog at the end of the movie, and you see the plane with the whole studio going off and leaving him on the tarmac. You don't kill the dog.
Well, it is true. We write fiction. We write suspense thrillers where there's a lot. It's always life and death.
Yeah.
There's murder. There's terror. There's all kinds of chaos going on, and readers go along with it, and they love it. But I've found out that you can write a scene where you send a busload of nuns off a cliff.
Yeah.
In flames. And people will just go along with that and not even bat an eye. But if the puppy is limping after that, you are just your host.
You got to get the puppy out of the bus
Yes.
before it goes over.
Exactly. I learned my lesson now. But anyway, so what got you into suspense, mystery, paranormal? Was it just what you
Desperation.
loved? Desperation.
No.
Okay.
I always said I was one of those really lucky kids. My mom was born in Dublin. My dad was born in Stirling, Scotland. They came to the United States with a truckload of books, which is why one of the reasons I began such a love affair with history. And then, of course, growing up in Florida, I loved Florida history, I loved American history. I was just one of those kids who did fall in love with it. So I liked that to begin with, and I knew I probably wanted to write, work in historical fiction. But they also, like my dad's favorite was Edgar Allan Poe. They loved Lovecraft. They had, we had all kinds of Mickey Spillane. I mean, there's just everything in my house. And so reading it, I really enjoyed it. And reading it, I enjoyed it, but I also come from I mean, I don't want to say my entire state is crazy, but pretty much so. So, I mean, Florida is one of those places. My husband claims people, come from other states to Florida to do bad things, which is often true. However, we have raised some of our own homegrown crazies. And I think my favorite was one time, Florida has the death penalty, and a killer was going to the electric chair when we still had what we called Old Sparky. And this man had really, like dead is dead. I mean, like how horribly can you kill somebody? But he had committed the most outrageous murders, most horrible murders, like cut a 9-month fetus out of a woman and then chopped up the baby. And I mean, he did terrible, terrible things. And he was going to the electric chair. And for some reason, I hadn't really been watching that much of the news. I knew he was going to it. But I always thought when you went to the electric chair, you were totally shaven, and then things were put on you. Well, apparently they didn't shave this man, and his head caught fire when he was in the electric chair. So of course there was, this horrible outcry, and because I had children and because of what he had done, I couldn't help but think it's kind of too bad he didn't burn up completely. But I don't mean, that would be cruel and unusual. But the outcry that went across the state was, some people thinking it wasn't enough, he should have been drawn and quartered and chopped to pieces, and some people thinking that's so totally cruel and inhumane, we have to stop it. So the next day, the headline of the Miami Herald was, "Electric Chair Deemed Dangerous." And I just remember thinking, I know why we have Carl Hyacin. I know why we have Dave Barry. We're very interesting about our take on things.
That's okay. I'm from California, so we like to look to Florida to make us feel better about ourselves.
I know. But y'all be proud to know that we are learning how to vote, okay? We're starting to get that one down. So what about you?
What about me? Lawyer.
Did that have anything to do with it?
With starting to write suspense and mysteries? Not really. I wanted to write what I liked to read.
Yeah.
I love to read. I grew up reading, Nancy Drew, of course, but Ray Bradbury, ton of science fiction, ton of thrillers. My father was an English professor, so we had like all the literature in the house, but he had the shelf up top that I wasn't allowed to read, which was John D. MacDonald. All these kind of like, cheeky, sexy mysteries and pulp fiction that I wasn't allowed to read.
I got to tell you one of my takes on John D. MacDonald. Okay. I absolutely love John D. MacDonald, but I thought it was one of those times you could really tell it was a man writing them, because his character was 40-something, a little bit grizzled, and he always had a 22-year-old double D bouncing around the boat. That is a male fantasy. Okay, that's right. I don't know. Maybe. No, probably not.
And I was going to say, no, now you've totally lost me here. I was thinking about the flip side of that fantasy, but never mind. I wrote my first novel when I was 16. It wasn't illustrated, like with crayons. Okay. But it was I first thought I was going to write romantic fiction. So I loved sports as well, so I thought if I combined them, like a romance set in the world of the most exciting sport I could think of, it would be like a surefire winner. And so I set it at the Indy 500 among auto racing, because it's like fast and dangerous, and the race drivers are all like cool guys and everything. And then so this young girl comes and meets this race driver and falls desperately in love with him, and then he gets in his car and he drives 200 miles an hour and to a wall and explodes in flames and dies.
What? There were no cliffs available?
No, there were no cliffs available. So then it was so sad. I was crying writing this, which is what you think it's all about when you're 16 and you think you know everything about love. So then she gets, the girl gets herself back together, and she goes back to the race, and she finds a new driver and falls in love with him, and damn it if he doesn't just get into his car and drive 200 miles straight into a wall and burst into flames and die. And after about like page 60, I killed all the men in the book. So that was the end of the story. Convinced me that possibly sports and romance fiction were not for me. And
you
then-
needed to make her drive herself and not drive into the wall.
I know that now. I know that now. See, this is all about living and learning about what you have to do. The next time, then it was when I did have the little kids at home, so I don't think that my brain was all put back together yet from like not sleeping for months on
That's
end.
more than possible.
And I decided I was going to write this great novel. It was going to be about a scam and a sting, and it was, it was going to be like all these like con artists, and they were going to get the bad guys, and they were going to turn the tables, and it would run this great plot, and it had like crazy dialogue and lots of cute little scenes and everything, and it just did not have a plot. And I didn't realize this until someone said, "What are you writing?" And I said, "I'm writing a murder mystery." And they said, "Yeah, there's just one problem. Nobody dies." So that one went into the file cabinet. And you kind of gradually figured out how to put together a plot with compelling characters and figure out what's opposing them, what's the problem that they're trying to solve. Here's the thing about writing. I mean, you were a theater major. I don't have a degree in English. I don't have an MFA. There's no single path to becoming a professional writer. It's
No, we have friends who've come from everything. A lot
Yeah.
of, F. Paul Wilson's a doctor. I think David Morrell was a professor.
Yeah,
Steve Berry, another attorney.
a lot of attorneys.
Yeah.
Um,
Tess Gerritsen,
she's
doctor. Kathy Reichs,
forensic
seriously,
anthropologist. Yeah,
she is her
Bones,
character. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, you
People
can
come from everything.
I would just say make sure you're a reader.
Yeah.
You have to read, and college is good. College is good.
I would have been happy if somebody would have just paid me to go to college all my life. That probably would have made me very happy. But I believe with my whole heart, everybody I know from anything, any walk of life. In fact, Nora Roberts, I think, is probably one of the top 5 sellers today.
Probably.
You still go to college, okay, guys? She did not get a degree. She just started writing up. She lives in a mountain in Maryland and just started writing because winter was coming, for real, to the mountains of Maryland. So, but the thing again, you go back to the fact that people who write loved to read, and I think that's still one of the most important things. And something that I find a little bit disappointing is when you do hear people who are now writing, who are now publishing, say, "Oh my God, I don't have time to read anymore." I think if you forget to read, you forget what you loved so much and why you want to be able to do the same thing, to give back with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And I always think too, I'm so grateful to books because with 5 children, and you know this too, like you were talking about your notepad, I probably would have been like really nasty and totally disliked by all kinds of people, for the time you have to wait in a doctor's office, the time you're in the car waiting for the child to actually come out of the school. If you have a book and you sit there and read, you're never mad at anybody. It's really good.
That's true.
Because you have something to do. And I realize we now have computer and phone games, but I don't know. I also, this is strange too, because not everybody can do this, but I have books everywhere. I can read them.
Some people don't.
They don't. There's one in the car if I wind up stuck somewhere in the car. There's one in my bag to always be able to go on an airplane.
Yeah.
There's I don't want to add this one in. There's one in the bathroom, you're taking a bath, which is why I like a book, because if you are taking a bath and you drop your book in the bathtub, it's not the end of the world. If you drop your electronic device, it's not good. So that's why I still like to have books too.
Yeah, my son, it warms my heart that I'll get a text from him. He'll say, "I'm leaving work. I'm going to get on the subway in 7 minutes. I need a book. Give me some recommendations."
Yeah.
And I think, oh, I did good.
Yes. Well, I would say let me see. My oldest has been writing. He's actually written a story with me that was in it's in a wonderful book that I forgot the title of. But I'm hoping he'll grow up and write. And my third son wound up as a graphics major and met his wife at Pratt. And she, I just love it because she it's very strange because we're so opposite. She's Ukrainian. Her name is Yevgenia Yaditskaya, and they wanted a hyphen, and my husband's last name is Potsitsere, so her name would have been Yevgenia Yaditskaya Potsitsere, and it's kind of like, no, don't, please, like we won't be offended if you leave that off your professional name. but she is an artist and paper engineer. And so when you're leaving Barnes & Noble, all those cute little pop-up cards like for Mother's Day and Father's Day and things like that are hers. And she's also done a Toy Story tie-in and a number of other things. So it's like really cool when you've got somebody else that you can kind of get into books with. So, and they all read. I mean, thank God. So.
Yeah. Okay, so how had you always wanted to write paranormal, or did that just come out of something from your own life, or it just fascinated you?
My dead parents are not still living with me. No.
No.
I love the whole concept. I mean, that is one thing, and one thing that's kind of fun is when you do a paranormal and you're, say, at a Barnes & Noble, and then you're speaking and then you're signing, the most unlikely person, like the really strict-looking guy in the business suit, will come up to you and say, I have a ghost story for you. You know, but I'll tell you, one of the things that really got me, where I don't know, I mean, I really don't know. I'm open to all kinds of possibilities, but I don't know. My mom I grew up in a very Irish Catholic family, so you're already saying, I believe in God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Ghost. So we're kind of looking that there might be the possibility of things out there right from the get-go. I don't know if y'all have ever heard this one too. If you're Irish and Catholic, you're born guilty and afraid. Okay, so I came from this household, but the one, I have a friend, one of my child's friend, who is a Metro-Dade cop. It is a hard beat. Metro-Dade is very tough. He's one of those big, like, macho guys who would never be frightened of anything. You know, I mean, he's just not that type. Well, he was on call one day, and there was a huge pile up on I-95 down by us, and they called all the cops in, and the big thing was to get all the people out of the cars, because the amount of gas they could smell, the big fear is that everything's going to blow up quickly. So they have the cops going to all the cars, and he runs to his first car, and he gets the gentleman out of the front seat, out of the driver's seat, and the guy is like almost fighting him, like, no, get my daughter, she's in the back. He doesn't see anybody in the back seat, and he's like, no, she's hiding. In the meantime, he's got him halfway out of the car into a paramedic, and the man's, on the way to the paramedic, the man kept telling him, go back, my daughter, she's there. So he drops the guy at the paramedic, and he goes back to the car, and he finds a little girl. She'd hidden, she'd gotten terrified, and she'd gone down, in the backseat of the car down by the floor. And he gets her out, and he brings her to a paramedic. There's a huge explosion, all the cars go up. So he's, all of them are congratulating themselves. They all got everybody out of the car and everything. So he goes back to the first paramedic, and he said, I got the little girl, can I tell him? I want him to know that his daughter's okay. And the paramedic looked at him and said, I don't know what you're talking about. He was dead on impact. So he told me that story, and I thought, boy, if something's coming from anybody, because he's such a macho he-man, for him to believe that this really happened to him. Though I did tell a really good friend of ours, F. Paul Wilson, a writer who happens to be a doctor as well. I told him the story, and I said, and a total atheist. So I told him this story, and I said, okay, Paul, what do you think about that? And he said, I think you guys have really bad paramedics in the state of Florida. So you can take any of it any way you want to. It's all a matter. But I find it so interesting. I find the different stories that you hear fascinating.
So you've written, you have a continuing series called Crew of Hunters.
Crew of Hunters.
It's Krewe.
Because, you all know Crew, Louisiana Mardi Gras Crew. And of course it's that because it began in the first episode, if only. The first book takes place in New Orleans, and this crew was formed in New Orleans, so that's why they're unofficially known as the Crew of Hunters. And we like to call the moniker on it Supernatural Meets Criminal Minds, so because all these people wind up. And then I also do one which is straight suspense about an Irish bar. So I got to ask you, because your last out, which is absolutely fascinating and wonderful, features somebody with delusions.
Yeah, Phantom Instinct features a cop, a sheriff's detective in Los Angeles who suffers a head injury. In the opening scene, there's a shootout at this bar, and he's trying to he comes into this to arrest these people, and there's a shootout, the bar catches fire, the floor collapses, he goes down and suffers his head injury, and it causes it's an actual syndrome. It's called Fragoli syndrome. It means that he becomes, it's a kind of face blindness. So he can look at somebody, and at any time he can become convinced that they are an imposter, that someone has taken on a disguise, and is presenting themselves as someone he knows. And it's an actual terrifying condition. It can be caused by head injuries or by psychiatric issues or other kinds of dementia. But of course, for a cop, it's his job to find, identify, and arrest the bad guys. All of a sudden, he can't be convinced. At any time, he might be decide that the boy that's bagging his groceries at the store is actually this wanted gunman, and he might try to take him down. So that doesn't really work well with his career at this point in the story, because the department doesn't really want to give him a service weapon if he's going to go off and start tackling. And at one point he tackles one of his own colleagues because he becomes convinced. I mean, he knows that the guy he's looking for is 22 years old, this scrawny dude, and he jumps on his colleague who's 50 and 6 inches taller and takes him down to the ground, and he's absolutely convinced that the bad guy has been able to disguise himself as and of course this is terrible for his career, and it's terrible because the bad guy really is still out there somewhere, and nobody believes that. The heroine has become convinced that the bad guys were after her, and they are. And Aiden, the injured cop, is the only one who will believe her. Yeah. But she doesn't know whether she can trust him because he's got this head injury. So it's about them figuring out that neither one of them can they trust each other.
So you certainly figured out that plot part.
Yes, it's about perception. It's about perception. So it sounds cruel, but it's really fun to research all these unusual things. That is the greatest thing about writing fiction, because they say to write what you know, but it's really write what you love.
Yeah, right. I agree with that,
absolutely.
Because if you write what you think you know, you may not know it.
Right, yeah.
There's one book that I have out. I am a diver. I love to dive. I know how to dive. And I was writing a book in which they find a dead diver in a ship in the middle of Lake Michigan. Well, I had salt water in his lungs because I always dive off of the Caribbean. Now, nobody caught this. Nobody caught it in New York. Nobody, reading anything caught it until, of course, a reader caught it and wrote to me. So I was trying to come up with a plausible reason Lake Michigan suddenly had salt in it. I could not. But I said there might have been salt in the ship because it came across the Atlantic first. And then I said, no, I just made a really, really bad mistake. And thank you for pointing it out.
Oh, well.
So, well, no, but I'm kind of like, how could I make a mistake on something I know so well? But you can. So the research part of it, I think, is really, I do. I absolutely love the research part of it. And wherever you go, there's, oh God, Texas is so rich with it. But down by us, besides the entire state being just a little bit different and special, we have Key West. And Key West is its own totally unique place. And we have a story down there about a fellow who was born in Germany. When he was a young lad, he had a dream of a beautiful dark-haired girl, and his grandmother told him, that is going to be your true love. Well, he gets older, he marries, he comes to Key West through Cuba, and for some reason his wife, German wife, winds up moving to Zephyr Hills. But he is about 50, and in my mind, if you ever see pictures of this guy, he was really decrepit looking by 50. So, but anyway, into his hospital walks a beautiful young dark-haired girl, and it was like she's the true love of his life. She is at the time diagnosed with TB, which was a death sentence at the time. You weren't living. She had a husband, but he was gone as soon as he found out that she had TB. So our old decrepit guy named Carl Tanzler is madly in love with Elena de Hoyos. And so he convinces the family he's going to cure her and get her better, which he can't do. She has TB, she dies. He arranges for this wonderful mausoleum in the Key West Cemetery. There's a funeral, wake and a funeral for her, like 500 people come and pay her respects. 2 years later, he just all of a sudden out of the clear blue quits going to the mausoleum to do anything for her. And he spends the next 7 years, just working, and he would be in town and he would buy mortician's wax and wire and women's lingerie and perfume and all kinds of things like that, but it's Key West, Florida, so nobody really notices. 7 years after the mausoleum, he's quit going to the mausoleum, someone is looking into the window of the airplane. He lives on an airplane on the beach because he thinks he's going to fly to heaven one day. And they see Elena de Hoyos in a wedding dress preserved on his bed. So it's a very Catholic family. The sisters, just appalled and horrified and everything. And there's a couple stories. One is that, she tells him she's getting the police. He tells her just to give him 3 days so that he can create an image of Elena to keep. I probably think the sister
was he making a dummy, or did he actually have?
No.
Okay.
When he quit going to the mausoleum, it's because he already had the corpse. So anyway, the police take him to the police station. There's nothing to charge him with. He didn't kill her. Statute on grave robbery was 5 years. So they bring in a psychiatrist who, I'm not sure why, but he deems the man sane. So they're going to let him go. The day that they let him go, the mausoleum explodes and everybody's like, oh, well, who cares? He's out of here. And because poor Elena, for some reason, she's now been dead for 9 years. She has been repaired with this wire, mortician's wax, and everything else. They have another viewing for her at the Dean Lopez Funeral Home, and 5,000 people get to come through and see her. And then the story is that she was dismembered, and only the priest, the sheriff, and the head of the Key West Cemetery knew where her pieces were buried, so that he couldn't put her back together again. Well, anyway, for the next years, here to me is the weirdest part of the story. He goes to Zephyr Hills, where his wife helps him. She doesn't move in with him, but she helps him set up where he can charge everybody a quarter to hear the story of his love for Elena. And it was written up in Parade magazine and all over the country like as the best romance ever. But they didn't, at that time, the media did not write things about, yes, he was sleeping with her. He'd outfitted her anatomically so that she could be his wife in every way. So they didn't write that kind of stuff in the paper back then. So it was this huge love story and totally. And then when he's eventually found dead, he's found in a coffin with the effigy of Elena he made for himself when she was taken in. And a lot of people claim, oh, no, he kept the real body and gave the effigy to the police when they came for it. And I keep thinking, even in Key West, we are a little bit off, but we usually know the difference between a real body, and a fake body. And then some people think, oh, but he dug up another body to give them or whatever. And it's kind of like, I think they probably really had the real Elena and whatever. But he did die holding her effigy in his arms and in his coffin. So it just became, it's one of the great stories about Key West. And it's kind of like, I don't remember the name of it, but I know that when I found that story, naturally my killer was leaving people as Elena had been left all over Key West. Right. So no matter where you go, there are these great stories, that you can either just use that they are or twist and use how you wish them.
You need to love to listen and take in what you are seeing and hearing. Whether you're going to a place you've never been before, to figure out what does it smell like? What are how are people dressed? How do they interact in the market? Or do they look at you on the subway, or do they make sure that they don't make eye contact on the subway? Different countries and places are like that. And you never know what you're going to find out that's unexpected. I have a character in the Joe Beckett series who is a pararescueman, a PJ, pararescue jumper. They're the guys like if you saw the perfect storm, they're like the Air National Guard people go out in the helicopters with the rescue swimmers and jump into the water and save the people who are on the sinking ships and everything. And I had been writing about him, and I wanted a chance to meet the actual guys. And I was stuck in traffic on US 101 in Mountain View, California, where you go past Moffett Field, which is where their base is, and there was this gigantic billboard, and I was just sitting there going okay, this is karma here. I'm literally stopped on the freeway, and it says, contact, if you want to be a PJ, contact, call 1-800, Air National Guard. So I wrote it down, called them up. It only took about 6 months to get permission, because I had, you call the media affairs office of the Air Force that puts you in charge with somebody, who puts you in charge with somebody else, who sends it up to this, and after months, a colonel finally called me out of the blue, and he basically wanted to make sure that I was a real person who had a real book contract. And he goes, I just want to make sure that if we send you down there, you're not going to ask the guys where the aliens at Area 51 are stored. So I said, I promise I won't do that this time. So I got they set me up with their master sergeant, who took me in one day to their headquarters. And if you have ever seen Mythbusters, sometimes they go to this gigantic hangar that looks like where they used to have a Zeppelin hangar. It's like this very big, unusual shaped hangar, and that's the PJs have a corner of that hangar. at Moffett Field to themselves, and that's where they got all their jet skis, all their scuba gear,
Everything
all their parachutes. Because these guys, they said we are recess with toys. That's what these young guys, and it was totally coincidental that the young guys are like 28, 29. They have like -% body fat. For weekend fun, they go climb El Capitan in the Yosemite. They're all. But it was just fascinating to talk to them, and they were so grateful. I was so appreciative that they were giving me like a half an hour of their time after, because you never know, they're going to get a call that night. Yeah. They're going to have to, fly 300 miles out into the Pacific to some tanker that's going down, and have to try to pull people off of that, or go up in the Sierras where like a school bus has gone off the road or something. But they talked to me, and they were grateful because and the sergeant said, you know what? Nobody ever writes about us. Everybody wants to write about Delta Force or the Navy SEALs or something. They don't even know that we exist. Yeah. But the funniest thing was when I went back to their office, I was getting ready to go meet my husband and my daughter for dinner at a restaurant down the road. And I was kind of looking outside. I said, do you know how to get to Burke's Steakhouse? And instantly, everybody, all the PJs and the sergeant and everybody else there, like one guy turns to their topographical map of California that's on the wall. The other guys are on the computers. Another guy's whipping out their phone. Some guys, I think, pull out a compass or something. And they're like, this is how you go, this is how you go. And I realized that this is them.
Yeah.
I had no idea. This is what they do. They find stuff. If you are lost, if you're in trouble, that is what they're about. They will find you. So that was what they loved to do more than anything else, and that told me about them, who these people were at their heart. So that was just like serendipity.
I think we're really lucky with a lot of that too, because I was always surprised. There's a group that John, Meg and I all belong to called International Thriller Writers. And every year, once a year, they have a day where you sign up and you get to go to the New York offices of the FBI.
Yes.
And they get out a large number of the officers to have a good
time. I have a story about that.
Okay.
Yes. So never mind. I'll tell you later or in a second.
I was just surprised. I was shocked that the FBI wanted to spend, was willing to spend a day with us, and they, they sent in their heads of departments and things like that, and. I was asking the woman in charge. I'm not sure what her position
from
would
Washington.
be.
She was the media
Yeah,
affairs. They really want you to write about the FBI in extremely flattering terms.
She said the FBI wants you to think of them as warm and cuddly.
Yeah, that's the guy. The year that the guy he was their organized crime guy, and he couldn't work the clicker. And
yes.
And he was talking about this. And he goes, "Here's a real terrible picture. This was the guy that had been in the trunk of this car in Jersey outside the diner for weeks before we found him. I'll show it to you briefly." And he's like, "Click, click," and everybody's like, "Ah!" Because it was really terrible. And then he set the clicker down, and it bumped it, and it went back to that photo, and he had no idea that he'd put this horrible crime scene photo up on there, and and then he went on and talked, and everybody was kind of like, but he never figured it out until later on. No. I signed up for this great opportunity, and I knew I'm going to go downtown in New York City. I'm not from New York. I know I want to dress up nicely because I know all the women who work in the office there. They dress professionally. I'm going to wear like a dress and heels, and I'm going to do my, I'm going to brush my hair and everything, and I'm going to leave 2 hours ahead of time so I can get down there and get breakfast, buy a new notebook, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm looking I am Miss City, super slick here. I walked in, sat down on the train, I'm going to be down there in 5 minutes, and then 10 minutes later I look out and I'm like, why am I in Brooklyn?
Oh God!
I'd gotten on the wrong subway train, and I'm like, oh God, So then it took me an hour and 15 minutes to get back to the thing.
Well,
so
you gave yourself time.
I did.
Yeah.
I ended up running up the street, running into the building. I had on these stupid sandals that had little, I had to take them off to put them through the metal detector. I was sweating. They finally put my shoes through, and I go running, here I am, I'm running through this building barefoot, complete sweat with my shoes in my hands going, where's the FBI? I need the FBI. I thought, I'm surprised they didn't just take me down.
I'm often surprised they don't just take a lot of us down because, seriously, but this is what makes me think that the government does actually know what you're doing all the time. Because we're always looking at poisons undetectable at usual autopsy, or or actually though I always thought this was funny too, because we have a group, local group, another group, mystery writers, they're mystery writers. And we have a branch in Florida, South Florida, and it's really wonderful. A lot of the men involved with it have been Florida law enforcement, they've been Florida cops, they have been marshals, they've all been in some type of law enforcement. And, again, I have been looking at best knife for actually decapitating a corpse. And so I asked them, and then about an hour and a half later, I left the table, and they were still fighting over the best knife with which to decapitate a corpse. So it's I think anything that you do that you get involved with, people can give you so very much. And we have a guy, and his blog is open to everybody. We have another mutual friend named Doug Lyle, a physician who does a whole thing on, look him up, Doug P. Lyle, because he does a blog. If you need to know proper medical nomenclature for killing people in various ways.
He writes Forensics for Dummies.
Right.
He writes the Dummies books, Forensics for Dummies. So
and he gives you a lot too. I'm all, because it's always I try to make sure I answer him on everything else. So I can say, Doug, I'm trying to kill somebody with with the fish, the poison fish. So, but I mean, it's amazing to have friends like this, to join groups like this. And I think we're down to 10 minutes, so we're supposed to open to questions.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, we have 5 more. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm looking the wrong way. But that's one thing I recommend. And I didn't know anyone at all who wrote when I started writing, and I bought something called Writer's Digest Writer's Market, which I still suggest for everyone because it says who's buying what, when, and all that type of thing. Whether nonfiction, fiction, academic, non-academic, whatever it is that you're doing, there's usually tremendous information in it. Of course, you do need a new copy because editors change the same way, and you always want to. One of the best things for submitting material is you always want to make sure you know the editor that you want it to go to and use their name, because like everybody else, editors don't want to whom it may concern,
right.
or editorial.
Yes.
Or, it's like getting resident or current resident. They don't want to get things like that.
Yeah.
So it's good to have Writer's Digest, Writer's Market, because you can get names. And besides, writing can be, first of all, it can be very subjective. We all know that. Somebody can read a book and love it. Somebody can read a book and hate it. The same thing with any movie. But if you have something like that, you know who's buying what. You can read and find out what the editor is for what it is that you're working on, and get your manuscript in the right place, because it can take a very, very long time.
Yeah. All right. Okay. I think if I'm good for questions if you are.
I can do anything you want to do.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
Does anybody have any?
Any questions?
I would like to know how your theater background has helped you, perhaps in character development or in description writing.
That's an excellent question. How has Heather's theater background helped her with character development and writing?
Well, when I first had started writing, I thought that theater had stood me very, very well, because I didn't know many people who were just as good at rejection as I was. Had that part down pat. But I think you do. I mean, one thing that's true is it's such a different thing. I think theater has helped me a tremendous amount, because I'm really not afraid of anything. I'm afraid of everything in the world, but not as far as speaking, meeting people, going out on the road, things like that. I'm very comfortable with whatever comes up. So I do think theater definitely gave me that. And as far as characters go, I think definitely, but I think all of us have that in us. Everybody does, because if you look at the people in this room, everybody is individual. Or even if you were to take, because we've gone through the kids growing up, so even if you were to take a whole classroom of 18-year-olds, they have this in common. They're all students, but there's also all these little things about them that make them individual. People watching, I think, is the best. And then having read so many characters. But also, I was going to say, one of the things that's great about this is when you get into it and start doing some of the things because of writing. If you go to Mystery Writers in Key West, one of the people who does publicity for them used to work for Mel Fisher. So if you're a diver, you get to go out over the Bank of Spain of the Etosha Find. And then one time when I had written a paranormal, I got to have a seance in the House of the Seven Gables. So I mean, you wind up with all kinds of really, don't you think, really cool opportunities?
Very cool
because getting in to see the
FBI,
yes, and and spend the time with your
guys. Yes,
so,
very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many drafts do you go through from beginning to sending up to your editor?
how many drafts do we go through? A lot. It really is a process. I've changed the way I work over the years. I used to just like think about an idea for, just like staring at the walls for a few days and then sit down and start to write. Yeah. And that was a guarantee that I would spend way too much time rewriting. I've gone in the other direction, brainstorming a lot more now before I even start to write. Come up, and I'm lucky to have an agent and an editor, so come up with ideas and bat those back and forth to make sure that those are really solid. It's not just like, it's the idea that keeps chasing you. If you can't, it wakes you up at night, you can't let it go. You can see all different ways it can develop into something. Then that's what I sit down to write. And then it's like, I just spent like 2 months on the book I'm working on now. I spent about 2 months writing, working on an outline, which is like beginning, like the critical incident at the start, the major turning points, and the ending. So, and I kept thinking, like, am I spending too much time on this? I found that it's made the actual draft, which is what I hate the most, a rough draft. A lot of people love it. I don't. It's just like pulling my own fingernails out. But that has taken so much less time than just sitting down and just seeing where it goes. But I'm still going to probably do probably 4 or 5 drafts by the time I'm done of this. Yeah.
I have to begin with something. It's an image of something. This story I told you about, I used that in a book. I can't remember the title of it. I used it. But then people that we meet, I think, are another friend happens to be what they call a fabricator, and her job is, she works for Legacy Studios, which was the old Stan Winston Studios, and her job is to create things. So she let us come through. She was able to let us come through the studio one day, and it was like one of the coolest things I've ever seen, because the Geico pig was like sitting right next to a really ripped up, torn up zombie from a different movie. So, but that's what they do. They create everything that you need. And one of her jobs is to dress Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. So I mean, it's just such a unique field, and her place was so unique. I wasn't sure where I was going with it, but I couldn't help but wonder what it would be like if you were alone in those studios and some of the things suddenly began to move. Mm-hmm. So I started with that, but then like Meg, I stopped and did the outline. One of the reasons I do an outline is because I write on contract, and I do have 5 children, and when they were much younger, I learned that they paid you if you could do a proposal and they knew where you were going. Not that they paid you more or anything, but it would be part of your contract, that mm-hmm. you would get ahead of time before the book was done. But I also discovered that if you have a good outline, you may not even follow it completely. At some point, you may veer entirely, which is fine. But if you have an outline, you always have a way to go, so that you're not on page 50 wondering,
right, exactly.
Yeah, where am I going to go from here?
Mm-hmm. But multiple drafts. It took me a long time to figure out that it really is a process, that you can't do it all at once. Certainly writing a novel is a big project. And if you just say, I'm going to sit down today and write a novel, you're going to just like, your head will explode. But if you sit down and take it one piece at a time, beginning, middle, end, characters, what's the threat, what's the major conflict, who's the antagonist, who's trying to stop the hero or heroine from getting the object of their most desperate desire, then that gets you at least going. And Heather's right about an outline. If you come up with something better, as you're in the heat of it, then certainly, develop it that way. But there's no such thing as a perfect first draft.
No. I was going to say, in my case, it helps too, because I have something called Lorna, who's a very good friend, a high school English teacher. God, is that woman ADHD? But I mean, she's perfect for me, because she will read things and tell me that I messed up an eye color. All the little things that, if you're in film, it would be the continuity director who mm-hmm. might foul up too. But Lorna is very, very precious, because I will read things that I've written and I still see them as right. Mm-hmm. And then when I give them to someone else, they're like, no, go back, look at that. And then it really helps a lot to catch it. Because I have a friend, actually she has a Hallmark show on right now. I think it's #1 rated Hallmark. Her name, the author's name is Cheryl Woods. But she had a series out one time where nobody caught it. There were 3 books in the series. In the first one, the heroine had blue eyes. And the second one, she had green eyes. And then by that point, it had been pointed out to her. So by the third book, she had blue-green eyes. But I mean, it's the kind of thing that, or it's
That
like what I'm
works.
saying. I didn't have Lorna helping me when I had salt in Lake Michigan. And I think she would have caught that like that. You know, I mean, she's just one. If you have a friend, you know, if you can get anybody, and this is funny because no, it doesn't have to be an editor, or if you have somebody who loves to read, who you can get to look at your stuff and comment for you, you can find out. I mean, you know, obviously, once you're publishing, your editor will hopefully find a lot of things. But I love to have Lorna before I even send things in, because I've had people miss things that she's caught just because it's just her personality. She catches things.
More questions?
Who's your favorite character you've created and why?
Who's the favorite character I've created and why? Oh, I'll say Evan Delaney, because she's the heroine of my first series, and that she was the character that was the first character that I ever had published. So of course she's probably the closest to me, and we're both. I mean, she's not, but we're both from Santa Barbara, and we both write. And she has a legal background because I was too chicken to give her any other kind of background at the time.
Yeah.
You know, she's me if I was younger and smarter and better looking, and she can run faster and jump higher, and she always has exactly the right comeback, exactly when you need it, not like the rest of us who think of it, you know,
Yeah, after you're gone.
5 minutes
Yeah,
later.
yeah.
So, but that's the luxury of being able to rewrite, because you can get the dialogue. So.
I just think I really, I don't know. I use, obviously I use, I think one of my favorite characters that I've used recently is a couple years ago we were on a writer's cruise, and a friend of mine who's big into theater too, has always been big into theater. She and I kept winding up at the piano bar every night, and this piano bar guy was just great. So I turned him into a her, and he's now in, I think it's called Haunted Destiny. But I had such a good time with this guy. He was so good, and you could imagine all the things, you know, that were happening. And then again, I just love places. So using places, I think, means an awful lot to me. Almost like places are characters. Because I don't know about you, but I remember when I was a kid, when I would read. I mean, I was so lucky. They had like everything. Like you could read Poe, and I would think I had a basement in Florida with wine. You know, I mean, they make things so visual and so real. And I also felt the same thing with, she loved Jean Plady and Victoria Holt and a lot of people like that. And I could just see the moors in England and, you know, the horses racing over it and things like that. And I think when I started writing, if there was anything that I did and I loved a place, I wanted people to see it, you know, the same way I could see all of those.
Right. Excellent. Yes, there were more questions. Yeah.
What software or templates do you use?
What software do we use?
Or templates?
I don't use any templates. I use Microsoft Word for Mac, but I don't use any templates.
I use Word Calibri 12, I think. I'm not sure. Try to remember to see what I'm doing. I think
Whatever works for you. I mean, some people, if you know,
Okay,
everybody's.
I just got one of these.
Okay.
Do we have any last?
Time for one last question? Yeah. We'll be here afterwards if
Yeah.
anybody still has other questions, but.
We need to go to the Brockton. If any of you are interested in buying their books and having them sign it, we're going to be doing that at the Brazos table, which is over on the other, right in front of the PAC building. And they can answer any questions there.
Are they signed? I think it's right.
Oh, you're doing it outside
Yeah,
here?
I think
Okay, it's over there. Okay, good, it's more
Well, there.
convenient.
I think, because that's what they wrote the books.
Let me go check.
Well, why don't you? Do you want to check, and we'll keep talking here for a sec? Yeah. You had a question? Yeah. How difficult was it to publish my first book? It was hard. It was because it wasn't the first book I wrote. I mean, I wrote a number of books that were too terrible to send out to get published. The first book I wrote that got published was China Lake, and it was published in Great Britain because, of course, I was living there. It was published there several years before it was published in the United States. It took me years to get published in the United States. So it's you have to be extremely persistent, and you have to be willing to understand when your own understanding of your craft is that you still need to raise it up. I mean, I thought it was brilliant all along. Now I look back at the stuff that I wrote, you know, when I was 20, and I'm just embarrassed by it. But you just have to learn how to raise the bar. You have to learn how high the bar is and train yourself to get over it. And once you do that, I think if you write a really hellaciously great book, there's going to be a place for it.
But I think remember today, too, that there are a million different ways to publish.
Right.
The one thing I say, if you're going to self-publish, please remember publish. That means doing your best to get an editor, freelancer, otherwise, maybe your mother really is the best editor in the world. But to really edit, line edit, copy edit, make sure you have everything right, make sure you've gotten a decent cover on it. There are many people out there now whose businesses are covers and editing and even promotion and marketing, like all the things that actually mean publishing. Also remember, it's going to go differently for everybody out there. I was on a panel once where I was always supposed to give the pep talk. Like even if you're rejected, Meg and I were probably, we struggled, we learned where we were going. But I was giving this speech about whatever you do, type, you put that hour in, whether you have children, whether you have a job, whatever you just work, you will get rejected. Please go back and do it again. Just keep trying and it will work. The woman next to me said, I just started writing. My husband looked over my shoulder. He thought it was really good. He happened to know this guy who was an agent. And the agent just had offers from houses right away. And then he decided he better put it on an auction. And then it sold quite nicely at auction. So I'm listening to her and I'm thinking, damn it, do it her way. That was so much better than mine. And she was for real. It was Diana Gabaldon,
Oh my
who
God.
wrote Outlander. Very, very nice woman. And she wasn't being, boastful in any way. She was just telling that's how it worked for her. So for everyone out there, writing is a different process and it's going to go a different way. And, there are no two stories that are going to be exactly alike. And that's part of the beauty of it. I can't recommend writers groups enough because they're so helpful in talking about what people will, are buying, are they looking for, or you can submit to a house that's gone down. You may, and recently, pretty much so Bertelsmann owns a good half of publishing. Who's next after Bertelsmann? Is it? We've lost track.
Hachette is eventually owned by a friend.
Yeah,
they're owned by a French.
So the Germans own our largest and the French own our second largest, but that's okay. It's okay. We are made out of everybody. So, but it will be different. Everything will be different. And part of it, the one thing I will say is that everyone I know who really wanted to write, who kept at it in one way or another, did wind up published. Not if you were playing around at it, and you kind of quit and you didn't really care and you didn't really try. But everybody I would know who really, really wanted it, and it could take anywhere from being like Diana, to, I actually know people who stuck at it for 10 years and then were published. So,
All right. Raquel, did you have any information about?
Yeah, we have the books outside here, so if you'd like to buy a book and talk further with our authors, you're welcome to do that, and we'd like to thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank
Thank you all so
Thanks
much.
for coming.